Hello, Jesse.
Jesse, hello.
Hello. Yeah, nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Jesse, the main idea is discussing about LDF and business and how it's connected with business results and company's development. It's the main idea.
Right.
Great.
And as I was saying in the WhatsApp, we want to make sure to talk also about what development is, because people have their idea of what it is, and it's much more than what their idea is.
Yeah, we understand it's a large, big idea, yes, and there are a lot of perspectives, variables, options, but we will try to develop conversation and to try to answer to some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Not for long answers, short answers. Okay? Variables, options, but...
Well, sometimes the answers will be a bit long, but also it's very good if you guys also say
we are on live now.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Let's start.
Yes.
Okay, we will start. Today we will have interesting conversation with Jesse, an expert in LDF concept, in LDF methodology. And the main idea of our conversation is speaking about LDF and business and how it connected with business result and company development. The first step, I will invite you to introducing yourself. I am Alexandr Межевов, coach consultant from Coaching Institute, and I am the leader of LDF project in Institute, and I'm working with business people and top management, and have my own company too. I'm the owner. Okay, Илья.
I'm coach too. I'm from Coach Institute too, and I will be the partner of Sasha.
Okay, Jesse, could you introducing yourself and what kind of product are you working on and where is your attention now?
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm, as you said, Jesse McKay, and I grew up in Canada and did a bachelor's degree in business and a master's degree in business. I've also studied psychology a lot and worked as an engineer for the European Space Agency on systems for the International Space Station. And so all of those things inform how I think. So in terms of what is my focus, before COVID, I was, sometimes I was working with businesses as an organizational development consultant. It's, as you know, but maybe not everyone listening knows, it's kind of like being a doctor for businesses, going in and seeing, and they say, well, we have a problem. And you say, okay, well, I'll work with your people, your structure, your culture, and try to make your business work in a way that's more successful. And so I've done that some, mostly in the US. And then, but the bigger thing I've been working on has been training leaders around the vertical development framework. And I've worked, of course, with Coach Institute for 11 years now in Russia, and also all over the world in about 15 countries on 6 continents. But of course, that changed a bit with COVID. So since COVID, I've been more doing a few workshops online and some coaching online, but I've had a lot more time because I don't like to work online so much. So I've been focusing on personal and professional research and development to improve what I'm doing once hopefully COVID will be over and I can teach in person again. And so to get to your question about who I work with, sometimes it's managers and executives of businesses, but it's more often organizational consultants and coaches, like people training in Coach Institute, because those are the people who these skills are probably the most useful for, the coaches and the consultants. And so I've worked all over the world with coaches and consultants, and also sometimes business people.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, you also mentioned what kind of people do I work with, and one aspect of that is like in what industry is their business. And really, that doesn't matter. I'm really working with the people side of business, and so what their business is, it's not very important. I don't need to be an expert in their business. Of course, if their business is engineering, especially software or space engineering, or I've also worked quite a bit in healthcare in the United States with healthcare companies. So I have more subject matter expertise in those areas, but really it doesn't matter very much what the person's company does. It's much more about how they think, how creative they are, and how they work with other people.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Now it's my turn. Jesse, can you tell us why do you use exactly LDF model in your projects in business?
What's happening in the business world right now, as we're all aware of, is there's an explosion of complexity and uncertainty. And there's at least 3 different types of complexity. One is systemic complexity, which is when there's complexity, when cause and effect are separated by time and space. And so, for example, the coal that was burned in the 1990s in the US is causing climate change, which is affecting countries in Africa today. And so there you see cause and effect are separated by time and space. And that some people don't think like that. They think in a more simple linear way. And that kind of simple linear thinking isn't adequate when actually what we're facing is big, complex, systemic challenges. So that's one type of complexity, is systemic complexity. Another type of complexity is dynamic complexity. Dynamic complexity is when the rules of the game are constantly changing. So you might imagine you're playing a card game and you're good at it, but then no one tells you, but the rules are changing, and the rules change, and you play a card and you're like, no, that doesn't work. That's not allowed. And you're like, what do you mean that's not allowed? Like, that was allowed 5 minutes ago. And it's like, no, the rules are different. And you're saying, well, what are the rules? And they say, well, I can't tell you, but that you can't play that card. It doesn't work. And so, of course, what's happening in business is something like this, is where the rules of the game are constantly changing. No one tells us when they change. So we need to really pay attention and be adaptive and learn quickly on our feet. So that's the second type of complexity that business people face. The third type is called social complexity. Social complexity is when like different people think differently and they feel the world differently. They, in some ways, even live in a different world. Like, of course, we all live in the same world, but on a psychological level, we care about different things. We focus on different things. We have different interpretations of the same data. And so social complexity is understanding that. So if you are say a Russian man and you're working with in a multinational company, and you have a Chinese woman and a South African man and a Brazilian woman on your executive team, and you aren't able but you're stuck in the way of thinking of a Russian man, you won't really understand those other people because they're different and they feel the world differently. They think about the world differently. And so you'll maybe say something that you think is inspiring to them, and it won't be inspiring to them. But maybe they won't even tell you that, but they think your idea is dumb, but they don't say it. And you just think, oh, it's a great idea. It feels good to me. And so this is an example of social complexity. So why do I study the LDF, or why do I work with it? Is because it helps leaders develop the inner and outer capacities, like inner and outer skills and muscles, like to not physical muscles, but psychological muscles, to be able to be successful and adaptive in the highly complex and fast changing and uncertain environments of business that we face today.
So here your LDF helps people overcome these types of complexity. It's easier to overcome it.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't say overcome, but it helps you. I mean, you could say that. Partly, it depends. It's, but I would say it's like integrating with or adapting to, because of course there's the idea of, sometimes people talk about how the dinosaurs died because they didn't adapt to the new environment. Well, in some ways, the big companies of today are sometimes like the dinosaurs. Like the environment changes, they don't adapt. A new guy comes along, a new little guy, like maybe Amazon, who was really small 25 years ago or 20 years ago, and they looked like nothing compared to the big guys. But then they understand the new world better. They adapt to the dynamic complexity better. And so they outcompete the old leaders in the industry.
Thank you, Sasha. And now it's your turn.
Thank you. Interesting. Psychology muscles. It's nice. Yeah, nice idea. How do you train businesses and team to use LDF in business development?
So that's a big question. And one of my pieces to, like, I could give a 10 or 15 day workshop every day, like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. So there's a lot to say about that. I'll just say, so one answer is, well, you need to come to Coach Institute and take the workshops, and Coach Institute will teach you. So a high level aspect of that is that usually first I work with the senior executives of a company and coaching them. So coaching them on their own development, coaching them on, but I don't come to them to say, hey, I want to work with you on your development. Of course, they come to me and they say, hey, I have a problem. My team's not listening to me. Can you make my team, like, what can I do to my team so that they behave better? And I say, well, we can work with your team, but first we need to work with you. What are you doing that's part of the problem? And if you're not able to admit that you're part of the problem and see and work on yourself, then I can't work with you, because this won't work, because it won't work to just fix your team. Everyone needs to be involved, and you need to be a leader of this improvement effort or this change effort. You need to be a role model. So that's the first thing I do in organizational engagements is coaching with the senior executive team. And then of course, while I'm doing that, I'm building trust, I'm developing relationship with them. They're getting a better and better idea of what development actually is. So, because partly people don't know what development is. Even people who think they know what development is, they don't know they have an idea in their head, usually an expert kind of idea. And so through this coaching, which is usually the first step of an organizational engagement, the leaders get a better sense of what we're talking about, what actual development is, by going through it themselves. And then once they have a sense and they have more trust, and they're more willing to sign a bigger contract to do organizational change initiative in their company. So then usually we expand it like to the executive team first, and then maybe the next layer of managers, and slowly coaching more people, sometimes like going into the company, watching the executive team, how they do a meeting together, watching what is the interpersonal dynamics between them, and then working with them on both the team and the individual level. And then as we start to open it up to the whole organization, or often we don't do the whole organization, we just open up to like the main top managers and executives. We're looking at the culture, like how is the culture of the company unsupportive to development? And how is the structure of the company, like how can we make the structure of the company support the development of the individuals. And usually there's ways that the culture and the structure right now are against the development of people, and stuck in place and not adaptive. And so, of course, this scares business leaders to change things, because they know what they're getting with their current structure, their current recruitment and selection and rewarding systems and management systems. They know what they have. And so in some ways, it's making small experiments so that people can gain trust that what we're doing will work, and it will work in their specific company. And that's not always true, of course. Like, every company and industry is a bit different, and of course the time is always running, so the world is always changing. So maybe what worked at the last company I worked with in America it very well may not work in the company that I work with next year in Russia, for example. So that means I need to be developed, and I need to be responding from a state of awareness, not responding from ideas in my head about this worked before, so I'll do it. It's actually another key idea here is action inquiry. And in action inquiry, you are constantly watching the results of the last action that you did. So if something's not working, that's okay. That's feedback. You quickly learn from it, adapt, try something else. And so part of the way of being of later action logic leaders is to live in a state of what Professor Bill Torbert from Harvard and Boston College, he calls action inquiry, which is not operating out of your ideas of how the world works, but constantly paying attention to how the world works and updating your map of the world and updating your behavior all the time and constantly learning.
Thank you for your answer. And you use personal coaching with leaders and teamwork, and you are working with team in workshops. But how is it connected with business result of companies? What is measured by LDF?
Right. So a lot of things are measured by the LDF. Mostly, of course, the LDF is the individual psychological instrument. So it's measuring the complexity and the structure of a person's consciousness. So, for example, one person, if you ask someone, are you a good person? Like a young person, like a person at an earlier action logic, they might say yes or no. And it's a pretty simple answer. But someone at a middle action logic, they might say, well, sometimes I'm a good person, sometimes I'm a bad person. So you can see already the structure of that answer is more complex. Like they're seeing it's not so black and white. Whether or not I'm a good person or a bad person depends upon the way of thinking of the person judging that. So see, this is even more complex. They're not saying, like the person who says sometimes I'm good and sometimes I'm bad, they still have an idea in the background that there's an objective definition of what good and what bad is. But the next layer up, or the next level of development, would say, oh, there's no actual truth in the universe about what makes a good person or what makes a bad person. Like different people have different definitions. And so whether or not I'm good or bad, it depends on your definition. And yeah, so you can see, I'm just trying to give a little example of that the LDF is measuring the complexity of the structure of a person's thinking and relationship with their experience. And that's another way to talk about it, is that the LDF is measuring how do you relate to your experience. So for example, like if you feel sad, do you go have some alcohol, or do you have the inner strength to stay with your sadness? And so that's an example of your relationship to your experience. But actually, that's an example that the LDF doesn't measure very well. So the LDF is a very imperfect instrument because it measures kind of like, it measures the complexity of your experience when you're not under pressure. Because when you fill it out, of course, you're probably in a warm, safe room with no one bothering you. And so you don't have someone trying to fight with you and some fires to put out over here. So I have a lot of hesitation about the LDF needs to be improved, is one thing to say. So coming to the second part of your question about business and business results. One of the key things the LDF is measuring is the capacity to, there's a saying in English that's a horrible saying. It's like, I'm sure you know it, is thinking outside the box. But the problem with that saying is that everyone who's not thinking out, like it's a so not thinking outside the box to way to talk about creativity. And so for someone at a later action logic would find new and fresh and creative ways to relate to things and to relate to themselves, to relate to each other, to see most people have a way of seeing the world and thinking about the world that's pretty stale. Like they learned it from other people and it's not very fresh and creative. People at later action logics, they can see the old, boring, stale way of seeing that other people see, but they also are better at seeing in other fresh, new ways. And someone in business that was great at this was Steve Jobs, for example, who leading Apple, is he could see people don't know it, but they want phones to be like this. And then lots of people were like, no, that sounds stupid. But actually, Steve Jobs ended up being right. Yeah. And so a person at later action logic, they're not just stuck in the cultural expectations and cultural conditioning of everyone else. Because that's a key thing that it's measuring is, are you a puppet of culture? Are you a puppet of your own personality? Or are you getting more and more free of your own personality and your own culture so that you can say, how would an African woman see this situation? And is there something useful from her way of seeing in this situation? And so you're able to come up with, fresh creative answers. So that's a key thing that helps in business, is that you can be more innovative. You can make more innovations in products, like Steve Jobs did with all the Apple products. You can make innovations in business processes, like you can see and do business process re-engineering and say, if we reorganize these departments in this way, it seems like it doesn't make sense, but actually it will work better. And then also you can make innovations in management. So innovations in how the companies are run and how your company is run. And you can try, come up with new ways to organize your company and organize the way people work together that maybe no one else has really thought of. But you're able to do that much better if you have this more free, creative way of thinking that comes at the later stages of development, which is what the LDF is measuring. Another aspect that the LDF measures is, I mentioned social complexity before. And social complexity is the ability to take perspectives other than your own. And the LDF is measuring, what it's measuring is the underlying psychological capacities to do that. For example, it's called in psychology, bracketing your own experience, like taking your own experience, putting it in brackets to the side and saying, what's another way of experiencing this situation or seeing this situation or feeling this situation? And if you have, at the later stages of development, which is which the LDF is measuring, you have more capacity to put your own assumptions to the side and to see out of someone else's eyes. And you're just better at that. And naturally, you're going to be a better, more inspiring leader if you are able to see out of the eyes of everyone else on your team. You'll just be more in touch with them. And so that's another way that that later stages of development can help with business results, is because you're better in tune with your team, more able to see and feel the world that they see, and therefore more effective at interacting with them. Another key example is in terms of learning. The LDF measure, what the LDF measures, people who score later on it they're less afraid of the world in general, and they're less afraid of feedback. Like, if like people, part of the definition of earlier action logics is that they have a way of thinking about the world and they think they're right. And so they're actually mistaking their thoughts for reality. Like say that, oh, I think that you did something and I think you're a jerk. And someone says, well, that's just your perception. I'm like, no, he's really a jerk. And so if I'm at that middle or early action logic, then I actually believe that my perception is the truth. And so I'm less able to learn. I'm less able to take feedback. I'm more threatened by feedback if I'm at a middle or early stage of development, versus if I'm at a late stage of development. If you tell me, hey, like what you said, your speech yesterday, it was terrible. I didn't connect with it at all. If I'm in an early stage of development, I'll be like, I don't like you. But if I'm in a late stage of development, I might say, oh, well, that's real. Like, I really want to know what's the impact of my actions. So thank you for telling me. Can you tell me more about like what didn't work for you? What was bothering you and what was boring for you? Because if you tell me that, then I can learn and I can update myself. Just like of course, our phones get updates for their operating systems every 6 months or 4 months or whatever it is. But how often do we update our own files? And so people at the later stages of development, they're more excited about constantly updating their files. And so what that means is they're excited about being wrong. Because if you tell me I'm right, I didn't learn anything. If you tell me I'm wrong, I'm like, oh, I'm curious about that. Like, how is it that I'm wrong? And of course, maybe like many times people bring us feedback, which is not that useful because it's actually about themselves more than it's about us. And so that's another thing that people at later stages of development are better at, is they're better at seeing, is this about me or is this really about the other person? And so I want to learn, I'm listening to you if you have feedback for me, but I'm also having a filter of like, okay, and I'm constantly watching, is this something for me to learn or is this something for the other person to learn? So those are some of the like I mentioned 3 ways that the LDF improves business results. One is by later action logic, people are better at creativity and innovation of products, processes, and management structure and style. People at later action logics are more inspirational leaders because they understand the people they work with better, because they can take more perspectives than their own. And people at later action logics are better at learning and constantly adapting to, I mentioned before, dynamic complexity, because they don't think my current map of the world is the truth. They think my current map of the world is just the best I have now, but it has blind spots and holes, and I'm excited about learning how I'm wrong. So tell me how I'm wrong, everybody, because then I can learn and adapt. And of course, that's going to lead to better business performance in an environment where there is dynamic complexity and the rules are changing.
Thank you, Jesse. It's interesting idea to look at the problem from the point of view of African woman. I didn't think about it. Okay.
Right. And I mean, you can actually, like, there's every possibility of how you can look at it. Like, how does the printer think about this problem? If the printer could think, like, how would I solve this problem if I was a printer? Or, I mean, so you can really potentially, like, it sounds sort of silly, and it could be, but if you really want to break out of your old way of thinking, which you need to do if you want to be a business leader who's creating the future, you need to break out of your stuck way of thinking. And we're all stuck in a way of thinking.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I agree with you that LDF makes people more effective as achievers things, but it takes time, a lot of time. And
Yes.
how does LDF manage this contradiction?
Right. So one thing about the later action logics is that they, which is another word for levels of development, as you know, but maybe not everyone listening knows. So the later action logics are better at paying attention to multiple time spans simultaneously. So what that means is that people at early action logics, they're like, I want fast results now. Like, if it's not going to be like soon, then I don't care, because like you can see this with children. Like, children were like, I want this now, and you say, well, you can have it tomorrow, and they're like, no. Tomorrow, like, because to them tomorrow doesn't exist. It's like now only exists. And so that child is living in a very short time horizon. As people grow and mature psychologically, they start to live in more and more time spans. So they live in, what's this going to look like in 100 years? What's this going to look like in 20 years? What's this going to look like in 1 year? What's in 5 years? And also, what's this going to look like tomorrow, or for the quarterly government, or for the quarterly company results? And so it's not so simple that later action logic people have a bigger time horizon. It's that later action logic people have a bigger and medium and small and immediate time horizon. So, because of course, if you only have a 100-year view, then the people who are at the earlier action logics in your company, they'll be like, this is stupid, and we need results now, and it's not working. And you're like, no, you need to work, you need to just wait for 90 more years, and then it will start to work. And they'll be like, nope. So that's part of how, or one aspect of the later action logics is that they consider more time horizons. So they're working on what actions can we take now that will position our company well in 5 years? Or, I mean, in the 1990s, it would have been like in 25 years or 30 years, but now the change is happening so fast that even imagining where you're going to be in 5 years is probably unrealistic. So, so part of the answer is that later action logic leaders and consultants and coaches will create strategic plans that work well in the long term, the medium term, and the short term. So in the short term, we need to pay attention to what are, maybe you've heard this term in business or in English called the low-hanging fruit. What are the easy things that we can do now that will make small wins, that will create momentum for and trust that this organizational change is going in a good direction? And so that's part of my answer. Another part of it is that if someone came to me and said, okay, I want to, like a business executive, they said, I want to transform my company and my people to a later action logic, but we need to do it fast. I would say, this isn't a fast food. This isn't a fast food game. Like, this is a big investment of your time, of your attention, of your money. And it's not something that can happen fast. If you want if you're only focused on fast results, then I wish you the best. And maybe I can refer them to a different consultant that works in a different way, because you can't do development in a fast way. I mean, sometimes, I mean, you can speed it up for sure. And that's the point of working with, as a coach and consultant, is I want to be as effective as possible at helping people transform themselves and their companies as quickly as possible. But it's really up to the other person how fast they transform. Because what does transformation mean? Transformation means that that person, for example, lets go of who they think they are. Lets go of what they think the world is and what the problems in business are, and sees in a new way. Like, for example, if a person, maybe your current personality is that there's a book in English, probably maybe you've heard of it. Men are from Mars and women are, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And so women just don't make sense. But if you're a male business executive and you have that attitude, that's what I would see that as, is the person saying, I don't have the inner muscles to take the perspectives of people that are different than me. And so if the business executive is saying, well, these other people, they just don't think right. Or if they're women or they're from a different country or whatever it is. Or if you're talking to a woman, if she's saying men don't think right, well, so like someone stuck, like, so you were asking about how do we develop quickly? Well, how you develop quickly for that person is you need to let go of that idea. You need to learn to see, like, in the ways and feel the world in the ways that the other people who you think don't make sense. You need to put aside your current beliefs. So people ask, how fast can I develop? And I would say, well, how fast can you let go of what you think you know about yourself? Even people say, well, I like, people often in workshops, they say, well, I'm just this way. And my response is, well, let's just say that you have been that way up until now, but aren't you free in this moment to be a different way? Like, do you have any power over your who you create yourself as? Because if you don't, then you're in the wrong workshop. Like, of course, we do have some limitations in terms of who we can be, but if you want to develop, you need to say, I've been this way up until now, but I'm actually the captain of my own ship, of my own personality, and I can change course. And so people say, how fast can you develop? I'm like, how fast can you turn that ship around? Because we need to go a different direction. So to come back to your question, it's when business leaders want fast results, you say, basically, well, we can do this and this and this to try to get some fast results, to create some momentum. But really, we're playing the long game here. And if you don't want to play the long game, I wish you the best. And maybe you should work with my friend, because he consults from McDonald's or whatever it is.
Thank you. It was interesting test, marshmallow test for children.
Yeah.
Children who wasn't able to wait for 5 minutes and add one marshmallow didn't get two. Yes.
That's a great example.
And LDF, it's a marshmallow test for adult. And achiever gets results today, individualist maybe tomorrow. And when you become strategist, you are able to get results today and tomorrow.
I like it. I like your answer better than mine. It's perfect. I love what you said, is that LDF is a marshmallow test for adults. And we don't want to, like, say the short term doesn't matter, because of course we do need to make some momentum. We do need to have some quick wins. We do need to have some, like, if we can, some improvement on the quarterly results. Yeah, so it's both.
Sasha, it's your turn.
Jesse, you tell us about growing up leaders. It takes a lot of time and investment, financial investment. And I agree with you. It's not easy. It's a difficult process. And in Russia, I see one tendency, the owners of company, they have a fear that leaders grow up and leave the company.
Yes.
What do you think about this situation?
So it's not impossible that I have seen that happen. But the main thing I think about it is that we need to look more closely at what's going on there. And often what's going on there is that the leader isn't doing her or his own transformational work. So the people below them are becoming more developed than the leader, and then they get bored and they want to go somewhere else. They want to go to another environment. They want to work in a business where the leader is as developed or more developed than them, because that will help them develop. Because the people that you work with, that's your social environment, is one of the biggest supports or impediments, barriers to your own development. If you're the lowest development, if your stage of development is lower than everyone that you work with, that's awesome from the perspective of if you want to develop. If your stage of development is higher than everyone you work with, it's not going to support you to develop very well. So if you go in as a consultant and you help the company and the people transform through consulting and coaching, and some of the people leave, or many of the people leave, it's likely that the senior executives and maybe the top person in the company isn't developing enough themselves to create the exciting developmental environment and organization that those later stage people would want to be in. Because what happens more often, if the leaders are doing their own work, is that they start to create a 21st century company. Like many of our companies are kind of like 16th century companies or 18th century companies, the way that they operate. And so if you actually start to create a 21st century company that is having not just individuals, but also the way that teams work together, the way that teams think together. So for example, a later action logic team, they challenge their own assumptions. They disagree with each other, but not in an ego way, but in a productive way. The people on the team, they are taking different perspectives and they're putting their own view aside, and they're changing their mind about things as they learn more. And they're trying to get feedback from each other. They're trying to get feedback from other teams so they can constantly learn and adapt. And so if you're on a team like this, that's very supportive for your development. And so people who are developing will want to be on teams like that. And so if people are leaving, it's at least likely a big part of it is that part of the organizational transformation initiative is failing, and the company isn't becoming a developmental company. It's just helping a few individuals. And then they look around and they see, hey, I want to play a bigger game. I want to work with people who are more developed, and I want to work in a company that's designed to support my development. So I'm going to go look somewhere else. So I would say that to those leaders' fears, that's a real thing to worry about. So that's why you as the leader of the company, that's why your development is so important. Because if you don't stay up to, like if you're not running as fast as the other people in the company in terms of psychological development, they will get bored with you and they'll leave. So let's really work with your development, and let's really, like, this can be inspiring for them to challenge themselves to put aside the things that they think are true about themselves and the world. And then when you put that aside, you have more freedom to become a new you that is more flexible, more adaptive, more intelligent.
Yeah, thank you.
So
yeah.
just to add one thing, so it can go like, if the transformation of the company is going well, it will be the opposite of the fear. It will be people won't be leaving. It'll be other people, like it'll be a recruitment strategy. Like other people will want to work for your company. Like if you look at like, I don't know Russia so well, but in Silicon Valley, in where most of the tech companies grow up in California, the companies that are really innovative in the way that they work together, those are the companies that the smartest people want to go work for. And so I would say to that executive who's afraid that their people will leave if they create a developmental organization, I would say, if you do it well, if you do it right, actually you'll be attracting a lot of new people. And the people who leave will be often, like if you're doing it well, will be the right people to leave, because they'll be the people who are stuck in one way of thinking. And that means they're not able to develop. And so they'll be like, this is stupid because it's getting all weird and it doesn't make sense anymore and it's too confusing or whatever it is, because that could be how an early action or middle action logic person experiences a late action logic company. So the right people will leave and you'll attract lots of new smart people who want to work in innovative ways that help them develop. But sorry, go ahead. You were starting to speak.
Thank you. Yeah.
The best way to win your fear of losing people is in developing yourself and the organization. Okay, Jesse, you told us in your answer about different organizations, about different companies. And I want to ask you in wider frame, what can you tell us about difference of executives in different countries? Do you see something?
Right. So part of later action logic way of being is paying attention to what's happening in this moment. So like being reflective about, so for example, one of the things I'm paying attention to is where is people's questions coming from? And it's interesting that part of my answer to your question is, this is something that I've noticed people in Russia ask like more than people in other countries, I've noticed. And so I don't know what it is that this is one difference, is that it seems like for some reason people in Russia are curious about how is it to be different? Like, how is the rest of the world different than us? And people say in America, they're not curious about that. It's kind of bad that they're not, I think, in my opinion, that they're not thinking about that. And so I have a question for you is, why is that a curiosity for you and in Russia?
I don't know. It's our national question.
Right. So because of the work that I'm doing, which is quite deep psychological work, mostly what I find is more similarities than differences. Of course, there's differences, like in some cultures, people have a harder shell. Like what I mean by a shell is a defensive structure. And so I would say, I mean, people's shells are different, or people's defenses, because the reason I'm talking about defenses is because development is actually in some ways, a destruction of your current personality and your current way of seeing. And so if you want to develop, we need together to work on your defenses against that destruction. So one thing I have seen is people in Russia, I mean, people everywhere have this, but maybe people in Russia sometimes have stronger, tougher shells. It's like armor. They have like, it's kind of like psychological armor on, and it takes maybe a little bit, it takes sometimes a little bit longer to convince Russian, especially male business executives who have been very successful, to say, hey, you can take off your armor. It's safe here. And if you don't, this won't work. I mean, it's up to you. whereas in some other cultures, people have less armor, but maybe their defense works in a different way. Or maybe, like say I work in Australia, people there, their armor is not very good, not very, like, which is good if I want to help them develop. But then sometimes they develop, it's not too fast, but it's like, I ask them to do something, maybe, to try a different perspective, and they do it without without considering enough. And then it feels wrong for them. And then afterwards, they're angry at me because they say, hey, you said I should do this, and I did that, and it hurt. And so then it's not common, but certainly it's much more common in Australia than in Russia, is because their armor is weaker, and I can convince them to do things that like hurt their current personality, and then they're angry at me after. Whereas in Russia, I don't remember someone like pushing themselves too far and then getting hurt, because in Russia, people are just like, no, I'm not listening to you. That's stupid. There's advantages and disadvantages to both of those. So that's an example of a difference between countries. And then, of course, there's things like in some countries, people will be more straight with you. And in some countries, if I say something, they'll smile and they'll nod and they'll act like, oh, it's a good idea, but then they don't think it's a good idea. So then you need to constantly ask them and check in, hey, what do you think? And please and support them. Please disagree with me. How do you disagree with me in this situation? Whereas in other countries, it's like, hey, you don't need to disagree with everything. Like, what's going on that you're disagreeing with everything? Like, can you learn something new? But coming back to my main answer to your question is, people are more similar across the world, in my experience, than different. We all have pretty similar defenses to development. We all have pretty similar difficulties and fears. Like when we let go of who we think we are, like having an idea of who you think you are, a stable, static idea that doesn't change, it gives it's kind of like a baby blanket. It gives you a kind of security. Like, I know who I am and I know what the world is. And so people across cultures, almost everyone has some fear of like, well, what if your idea of yourself is mostly outdated? It's like a tank from World War II. It's not very good anymore. And so you need to like get out of that World War II tank and find out who you are in this moment, because a lot of who people think they are is actually who they needed to be in childhood to get through difficult situations in childhood. So they're like, I'm just like that. And my response is, well, you're like that because it was a smart thing to do in a difficult situation in childhood, but this is a different situation now. So can you drop that old idea of who you are? And so across the world, everyone struggles with fear of the unknown, and it's required to go into the unknown to develop.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes and 4 questions. And
okay. I'll try to be faster.
Propose to change format for 1 minute question, 1 minute answer.
Got it.
Sasha, and it's your turn.
What kind of leaders are demanded for business today?
Before I mentioned systemic complexity, when cause and effect are separated by time and space, dynamic complexity, when the rules of the game are constantly changing, and social complexity, which is the complexity that different people live in different psychological worlds. So the leaders for today, they need to be able to work with all of those kinds of complexity and the unknown and uncertainty. And the later action logics that's exactly what like as you develop into the later action logics, you develop inner muscles that are designed exactly to work with those types of complexity. So business leaders need to be able to work in a complex and uncertain world. And later stage development gives you the inner psychological muscles to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. And the next question, what's your, as we think, you like individualist and strategists, as we think. And what's your interesting in exploring strategists and individualists?
Right. That, like, as we know, the world has a lot of problems, and a lot of people are having a really hard time. And people in all sorts of countries and for all sorts of ways. And there's a lot of different challenges that humanity faces. And so what to do? I mean, of course, no one knows because it's a huge complex system. So it's really hard to see what is the most effective thing I could do that could make my own little contribution to helping the world be better for our children and for grandchildren. And so part of why I like to work with individuals and strategists is that I might be wrong, but my hypothesis is that it's one of the most powerful ways to help, is because individuals and strategists, if you like, you normally need to be quite an intelligent person to become like to be at an individualist or a strategist, and quite self-aware already. And so if you can help these intelligent, self-aware people be better at, become even more intelligent and self-aware, and become better leaders in the world, then that's the kind of leadership that the world needs. Because if we have early action logic leadership that makes into good and bad and black and white, and we need to do like this and not this, like we need to pay attention to the short term and not the long term, or the long term and not the short term, like that kind of thinking, those kind of leaders are going to lead us into, like if you're driving a car, they're going to lead us into a tree. And so a big part of my inspiration to work with individuals and strategists is that I think it's the most effective way to make a small contribution to helping us humans not crash the bus off of the cliff. Another part of it is that it's fun. I like it. Individualists and strategists are really smart, creative people. And I love working with them and learning from them, and all of us together, hopefully becoming even more smart and even more creative. And then a final part of my answer is that it helps my own development. If I work with later action logic people, if I can help a development or a strategist become an alchemist, like that's developmental for me, because it challenges my own development to learn how to do that well and how to do it in a grounded way that makes a difference for people in their personal lives and in their business results.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. These fun people will help our world become more integrated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we can stop because time goes quickly, and we are speaking 1 hour. But we have more than 2 questions, and maybe we organize in the future the next conversation. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for this fascinating interview. I'm happy because it was interesting, and I understood you have a lot of knowledge and experience, and it's interesting to speak with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both so much. It's been fun to be with you. And as I said, like, I love to support the Coach Institute and the development of the people that you attract, because the people that Coach Institute attracts are such wise and loving and intelligent people. And I love to be part of the journey that you're all going on together, and to learn and to to hopefully also contribute to your learning.
Okay.
Thank you for this great conversation.
Yeah, and see you to the next interview, meeting, conversation, or other activities.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Take care.
Take
Nice to
care.
be with you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.